Writing linear equations using point-slope form. Point-slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Now remember whenever you did slope-intercept form, you had two different sets of coordinates, and you had x1, y1, x2, y2, and then you found the ratio between the two and the change in y over the change in x, and that gave you the slope, or m. Well, in this case, it gives us one set of coordinates. So this one set of coordinates, this one is going to be x1, this one's going to be y1, and our slope we learned is represented with the letter m. So now all I need to do is take these three and plug them into these three within the form. So we have y minus, instead of y1, I'm going to use -1, equals 1/2 of x minus -2. So I plugged in the y1, I plugged in the slope, and I plugged in the x1. Now all I need to do is solve them. So we're going to start with our parentheses, because order of operations says we always start with the parentheses. So inside the parentheses, you notice it says x minus -2. When you started adding and subtracting integers, you learned that when you subtract a negative, they actually combine to make a positive. So I kind of like to use this little scuba mask looking guy. So you have his little eyes and you circle them and you bring it down and you give him his little mouth, and he's got a little pucker going on because he's got a little oxygen tank in his mouth. So then we put the half in front, and then we're going to do the same thing over here. These two negatives are going to come together, so I'm going to circle the eyes, bring down his oxygen mask, and then he's going to pucker up, and it's going to be y plus 1 equals half of x plus 2. So now we're going to determine this by using our distributive property. So we're going to do half times x and then half of 2. So y plus 1 equals 1/2 of x and half of 2. We know that half of 2 is 1. So now we're going to combine like terms. So whenever we're solving equations or we're setting up equations, we have to move the variables to one side and the numbers to the other side. So we're going to take this +1 and we're going to do the opposite. So the opposite of +1 is -1. What I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other side of the equation. So these two are going to zero out. I'm going to put a z over them because -1 and +1 equals 0. So that's where your big Z comes from. Then I'm going to put a y because I don't need the 0. So then we have 1/2 of x. You'll notice over here we have a +1 and a -1. If you have a positive and a negative, they're going to cancel each other out. So those equal 0. So now your equation is just y equals half of x.